by the way, more than the news lines from that Economist interview, was Musk himself and how he handled it. I think the aftermath and the fallout from the interview is more interesting than the interview, because this is the world's richest man who claims to be for free speech, claims to be for debate, but anytime he gets even the mildest of questions, he has a total meltdown. First of all, he rarely does interviews. I know he hasn't done an interview with you. You've been desperate to get one. He doesn't do tough interviews. He melts down when he gets semi-tough questions. Do you remember when Don Lemon interviewed him in 2024? He almost started crying during the interview and then cancelled Don Lemon's show as a punishment for Don asking him questions about his drug use. And now you have The Economist, very sober, mainstream, centrist publication, not woke left at all, as he might say, and he calls this woman, the editor of The Economist, a traitor, simply for pointing out that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to British and London.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here, and this one centers on a question that should have a simple answer and didn't get one. A journalist from The Economist asked Elon Musk a direct yes or no question. Are you anti-Muslim? And instead of a clean denial, his answer talked about people with antithetical views and being against rape and murder, which implicitly links those things to the group he was just asked about. Mehdi Hasan breaks down why that non-answer matters more than the actual content of the interview. And Steve Hilton gets pressed on something separate but related: his public response, or lack of one, to a real deadly attack on a mosque in his own state. I want to walk through what's actually verifiable here versus what's characterization, because there's a lot going on in this one. Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because we take the specifics seriously. Now let's get into it.
Ultimately be good for the many millions who live in this state.
Of course I don't have a view on that I'm putting here as part of my campaign for governor. I've got views on lots of things, Piers, but I'm not paid to have opinions. I'm running for a job. I'm applying for a job. Now, you mentioned energy prices. It's absolutely right. As I said earlier, that's a huge issue. It's the driving reason everything is so expensive in California. But just the other week, we filled up our campaign truck in LA, $6.49. We went to Texas for a couple of events. The next day, $3.49. The Iran war is going on in a world where both of those things are true. Our electric bills in California are more than double the national average. That's a result of the climate posturing of the government in California. It's not doing anything for the climate. It's not helping the environment. What it is massively increasing costs for working people and small businesses in California. That's what I'm focused on. We can lower gas prices. My pledge is $3 gas. We can cut electric bills in half in California by changing our policies here. Nothing to do with the Iran war, nothing to do with federal policy. I think one of the problems is that actually, even though we have this constitution that has this beautiful idea of federalism and decentralized power, which I strongly support, the political conversation, certainly here in California, revolves around national politics when we've got the power to change what happens for daily life here in California right here. And that is 100% what I'm focused on.
Okay, Mehdi, I just want to slightly switch to something that is still involved in all this. The Elon Musk interview, which came out of the weekend with Zanny Minton Beddoes from The Economist, editor-in-chief there. A lot of news lines were made from this, some about AI and so on and so on. But there was a clip of him talking about Muslims. I wanted to play to you, given you're a Muslim.
Are you anti-Muslim?
I'm against having if people are coming to a country with antithetical views. I am against that. I'm against that. You know, I'm against. I'm against rape and murder. I'm against the imposition of rules and laws that are contrary to what we've come to accept in the West.
Now, there's a lot of fallout to that, not least because as he was saying this, new numbers came out which showed that the murder rate in England has dropped to its lowest in 50 years. So this idea, which people like Elon seem to have convinced themselves have been correct, which is that, our motherland is being run over, particularly by Muslims who are raping, pillaging and murdering everybody, is not borne out by statistical evidence. So there's that. Now, Zanny Minton Beddoes, that is on NBC, it's irresponsible for someone with 240 million followers, Elon, to propagate things that are simply not true. And he responded to that huge number of his followers by saying she is a traitor to the West, plain and simple.
Yes.
I mean, that is strong stuff, isn't it? What did you make of all this?
I mean, that's an understatement, but it's not strong stuff. It's outrageous, ridiculous, dangerous stuff. He knows perfectly well that he's putting a target on our back. When Elon Musk attacks people, and I've been attacked by him, you know what happens with his followers. He has a very cultish following like Trump does. It's very dangerous, and it's a ridiculous response, by the way. More than the news lines from that Economist interview was Musk himself and how he handled it. I think the aftermath and the fallout from the interview is more interesting than the interview, because this is the world's richest man who claims to be for free speech, claims to be for debate, but anytime he gets even the mildest of questions, he has a total meltdown. First of all, he rarely does interviews. I know he hasn't done an interview with you. You've been desperate to get one. He doesn't do tough interviews. He melts down when he gets semi-tough questions. Do you remember when Don Lemon interviewed him in 2024? He almost started crying during the interview and then cancelled Don Lemon's show as a punishment for Don asking him questions about his drug use. And now you have The Economist, very sober, mainstream, centrist publication, not woke left at all, as he might say, and he calls this woman, the editor of The Economist, a traitor, simply for pointing out that he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to British and London crime stats. The three of us are Brits, two of us are British Americans. We all know here in the US, I'm sure Steve gets asked by Republicans, oh, Britain, it's a hellscape, isn't it? And it's not a hellscape, as we all know. And it's ridiculous that he pushes this bullshit. And on the Muslim line, thank you, Zanny Minton Beddoes, too many journalists ignore the anti-Muslim rhetoric at the heart of the Musk movement and support for the far right. This is a man who funds Tommy Robinson, who supported Rupert Lowe, two of the most anti-Muslim voices in the UK, if not the West. And when he's asked this straight question, are you anti-Muslim? All he has to say is, no, I'm not. All he has to say was, I'm against anti-Muslim prejudice. All he has to say was, oh, I'm against criminals. I'm against extremists. That's all he had to say, Piers. But he couldn't do it. Instead, he says, I'm against people who have antithetical views coming into this country. I'm against rape and murder, suggesting Muslims are all guilty of rape and murder. Can you imagine if somebody asked Elon Musk or anyone prominent, are you anti-Jewish? And they didn't just say no. They said, well, I'm against people with different views. I'm against rape and murder. It's an outrageously bigoted thing to say by the richest man in the world. I'm glad she asked it. I'm sad that not enough journalists have followed up on that fact. That Elon Musk, the top donor to the Republican Party and Donald Trump, the richest man in the world, the owner of one of the most influential messaging platforms, is an anti-Muslim bigot. And that's not me calling him that. That's him embracing it.
Steve Hilton, what did you make of that? I mean, look, you know Britain as well as I do.
Yeah.
This weird narrative that Elon and many on the right in America seem to have developed, that we're getting literally invaded and overrun by Muslims, you know that's not true. What do you say to people when they say this to you?
So it's interesting. I hadn't actually seen that clip. I was aware of the interview. I hadn't really followed it. But yes, I think that this is there's a characterization that actually misses the real problem with what's going on in the UK, I think. Obviously, I have an interest in that. Don't follow it closely. But there's something I say on the campaign trail, actually, which is that I don't want this state that I love to turn into the country I left. But what I mean by that is what you're seeing, I think. There was a report that someone sent to me, one of the biggest figures in business in California, sent me a research report on what's going on in the UK economically, with the inability to build housing, the inability to improve energy infrastructure, the cost of everything, the bloat and bureaucracy and hassle of doing anything in the UK, which I think has produced, I mean, you'll know in more detail, Piers, but a sense of an economic, stagnation that probably is a really big part of why you get all this kind of sentiment. People are just frustrated with what's going on. And this person sent me that report and says, remind you of anywhere. And it does, because that's the way we're heading in California, with this bloated bureaucratic government that's making it impossible to do anything. And so in that sense, I think that that's the real point, I think.
Can I ask a question of Steve just on this subject? In May, there was an attack on a mosque in San Diego. 3 Muslims were murdered. It could have been 100 Muslim school kids murdered in a school nearby. It was 2 neo-Nazi white supremacists. In the past, you've been very vocal in condemning white nationalists. I remember you condemned the attack on the mosque in New Zealand back in 2019. This time, you're running for governor of California, massive terrorist attack against Muslims in your state. I didn't hear a word from you. I tried to look up what you said about it. I couldn't find a single posting.
I was there that day, actually. Funnily enough, Mehdi, I was actually there. I was very close by when it happened. And we went and spoke to local community leaders. Now, you may not have seen anything I said. We had a town hall that day, and I spoke about it. I was actually right there. Just a couple of miles.
Because there's not a single post from you about it that I could find. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
I mean, I don't necessarily kind of express every thought on everything all the time, but I definitely agree with you. I mean, that's completely unacceptable, and I was there and said so, and in that community on that day.
Mehdi, I just want to ask you very quickly. Netanyahu's due at the White House tomorrow. What should happen here? I mean, Mamdani, the mayor of New York, wants him arrested, but acknowledges he doesn't have the power to do that. What do you think should happen? What's the appropriate response to Netanyahu visiting the United States for the first time in months?
First time in months, but of course, as you've pointed out on this show, as have I think he came about 8 times in the run-up to the Iran war, didn't he? He was the world leader who visited the US most to make the case, including in the Situation Room. So let's hope he's not here to start another new war or new escalation. Who knows? We've got this Lindsey Graham recording that's out, that CNN and the Wall Street Journal have got from a documentary about Graham, where he's talking on the phone with Netanyahu, and they're discussing pressuring Trump on war. It's a very bizarre conversation to see a United States senator on a phone call with the prime minister of a foreign country discussing how they're going to pressure a president on foreign policy. I think his role in American politics is malign. I think a lot of Republicans understand that. Did you see the poll, Piers, that a plurality of Americans would like to see Netanyahu arrested, including 1 in 3 Republicans? So interestingly enough, Mamdani actually speaks for more Americans than his critics do. There's also a poll showing that American Jews prefer Zohran Mamdani to both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. So a lot of the noise doesn't really reflect public opinion. The mayor is right. He can't arrest Netanyahu. He first made that pledge in an interview with me in December 2024. I think he knew he couldn't do it, but it was an aspiration. Look, the ground has moved, Piers. It doesn't matter whether you want to arrest him or not. Look at the polling. People are anti what this Israeli government is doing, rightly so. They're anti-Netanyahu. Unfortunately, the opposition in Israel is just as bad as Netanyahu. So even if he loses the elections this year, the next guy coming in, Naftali Bennett or whoever it is equally hawkish, equally genocidal. I think the bigger question is, American government going forward, what will our relationship be like with Israel? We're quote unquote integrating our militaries, which a lot of people don't want, but it's happening in Congress. There's a massive disconnect between Congress, which remains super pro-Israel, and the American public, which no longer is. And I think that is a real democratic dysfunction if our people's representatives cannot reflect the will of the people on this very important foreign policy issue.
Steve Hilton, I mean, do you think there are legitimate claims that Benjamin Netanyahu and this Israeli government have committed war crimes?
Well, look, I thought that...
Let's start with the actual exchange, because the specific wording matters here. When asked directly whether he's anti-Muslim, Musk's answer pivoted to being against people with antithetical views coming into a country and being against rape and murder. He never said no. He never said he's against anti-Muslim prejudice. Specifically, Mehdi's point is precise here. A direct question deserves a direct answer, and the specific way this one got answered, linking the question about Muslims to crime and incompatible values without disavowing the premise, is worth naming plainly as evasive at minimum and as reinforcing a prejudiced framing at worst. On the UK crime statistics, a claim was made that India's murder rate recently hit its lowest level in roughly 50 years. That's the kind of specific claim worth verifying directly against UK Office for National Statistics data rather than taking from any single commentary, mine included, since crime statistics get cited selectively across the political spectrum constantly. If that figure holds up, it's a meaningful data point against the narrative of runaway crime tied to any specific demographic group and worth weighing seriously regardless of what anyone's prior assumptions were. On the San Diego Mosque attack, this is described as a real, documented act of violence against a specific religious community, and Mehdi's challenge to Steve Hilton was specific and fair, asking why you couldn't find any public statement condemning it, especially given Hilton's history of publicly condemning similar attacks in the past, like the 2019 New Zealand mosque shooting. Hilton's response, that he attended a town hall that day and spoke about it locally without necessarily posting about it, is a plausible explanation on its own terms, even if it wasn't independently verified in the clip itself. I'd note that the absence of a public post doesn't prove someone didn't respond privately or locally, but it's also fair to ask why a public figure who's condemned similar attacks before wouldn't also do so publicly this time, especially running for office in the same state where it happened. Here's where I want to draw a clear distinction. There's a real and important difference between critiquing specific public statements someone made on the record, which is fair game, and exactly what happened with the Musk exchange, and drawing broader conclusions about someone's private beliefs or motivations based on the absence of a social media post, which is a much shakier influence. Both things happened in this clip, and it's worth treating them with different levels of confidence on the broader question of anti-Muslim sentiment in political discourse. This is a real and serious concern worth taking seriously, regardless of who's raising it, and holding public figures accountable for imprecise or evasive answers to direct questions about prejudice is a reasonable journalistic standard to apply consistently to anyone about any group. So tell me, do you think a non-answer to a direct question like "Are you anti-Muslim?" is itself revealing? Or do you think there's a fair explanation for why someone might not want to give a simple yes or no to a loaded question? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these breakdowns that stick to what's actually verifiable, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.